So let's quickly go over to the CIAA. In the Southern Division, we've got things wrapped up, and it's kind of a usual suspect. Just talk about the Southern Division champion and Winston-Salem State.
Yeah, Winston has been kind of an enigma this year. They started off 1-2. They lost to UNC Pembroke by 3, in which they were leading in that game at home, and they just could not get any offense going in the second half. And then they just got completely obliterated by Virginia Union, and in between that, they went to Catawba and they won versus Catawba in a game they've never beaten Catawba before, but Catawba seems to be really down now this year. And so, and then they came in, they beat Virginia State, so that really helped their strength of schedule. And then the CIAA South, and plus they played Lincoln as their other crossover game. It's just been really weak. I mean, the South has just really been struggling to get the talent they need to really compete with the North. So, it's not a surprise to see them where they are going into the last week of the season against what will be the best team that they faced in some time in Fayetteville State. But it's Winston-Salem. That's what they want to win, and they have the talent. Just kind of worry about the offense, and they seem to sometimes the play calling looks good. Sometimes you start scratching your head and you're wondering what in the world's happening, and so you never know with the Rams if they're going to be the good Rams that show up or the bad Rams that show up. But they've gotten just enough to keep going.
Right, yeah, it was at Virginia State game, I think it was. I just made an observation that it's fitting that the Rams wear red because their offense is very conservative at times. But, as we're in this political season.
And you see that very often with Winston-Salem in particular. You look at Livingstone where they were up 30-0 in the first quarter, and you're just like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And then they managed to only score 10 more points with the first team offense in. You look at last week against Shaw, they were down 16-0 just before the end of the first half. And, then they stormed back and they went back to their bread and butter, which is the run game, giving it to, Tavon Hurst and Carryon Moore. But, they have these flashes where all of a sudden they dump a bunch of points on you, and then all of a sudden they're in this dogfight with teams that haven't won a game or barely won a game, or even with Johnson C. Smith, they had to score a touchdown in the fourth quarter just to beat them by a point. I mean, it's really concerning if you're a Ram fan on how can they stand up with some of the teams and these high scoring teams if they can't seem to get the offensive gear against lesser opponents.
Right. And then you talked about the strength of the North. That division title is still up for grabs this week. We won't know who gets it until Saturday. So we've got 2 games there. The primary game is Elizabeth City State at Bowie State. ECSU, a surprise this year. They made a coaching change and a little bit of a slow start, but they've gained some momentum and they're right there in the running. So just talk about that ECSU and Bowie State game and how important that is.
Yeah, so Elizabeth City has been this team that you didn't really know what to expect at the beginning of the season. They got Ernest Wilson, who took over for Waverly Tiller. Ernest was at Savannah State and really didn't do a whole lot there. And so Savannah State is a really hard gauge for, how good of a coach he may be. But he is an offensive coach, and you kind of see every game, outside the stumble they had at Johnson C. Smith, you kind of see every game that they've been improving. And so it's been actually rather refreshing to see Elizabeth City come back and start to really get on a roll. Not exactly a senior-laden team either. Mm-hmm. The Vikings are led by Daquan Hill, who can pass and he's a dual threat. He can run as well. And there are games where he is like their main offensive weapon. So lately the defense has been really stepping up, and so I'm very anxious to see after they hung 40 points on Chowan, who's a really good defensive team. They sort of outlasted Virginia Union, who was a very physical team. They got behind against Virginia State, and they were trying to storm back, but they just ran out of time, and they still scored 37, 38 points. So, I mean, they're kind of going against the cream of the crop for the North Division in Bowie. And Bowie is a team that, you know, they're led by Amir Hall at quarterback. They're really good on offense. They tend to have these lapses, too, that they'll score a bunch of points, then they're just kind of holding on for dear life. But they love to pass the ball. They do have a capable run game. So I think, you know, all the teams in the North have a good pass and run game, and ECSU has been able to really, compete with that. And so it's a very, very interesting game that should be interesting. But I listened to the game last week, and it was interesting to note that the announcer for Elizabeth City was saying that they haven't won in Bowie forever.
Right.
So if that doesn't scream home field advantage, I don't know what does.
Right.
But, you know, in terms of, you know, the championship, you know, it doesn't get any bigger than this.
Right. It's basically a division championship game, and then you get to go to the other championship game, so that's always exciting. And, of course, if ECSU pulls off the upset, they could go to the championship or they could not. And then just talk briefly about one of the games we'll be at this week, and that's Virginia State and Virginia Union.
Yeah, so, you know, there's a lot of implications. It's hard to even say who will be champs in the North because you have really three teams and you have a spoiler. And, you know, the three teams that could win the championship based on the results is Bowie, Elizabeth City, and Virginia State, with Virginia Union playing spoiler. Essentially, Bowie has one loss in conference play. So if they were able to win this game, they are the champions of the North. Now, Elizabeth City wins, and all of a sudden you have complete chaos. And so if you end up having to look to that Virginia State-Virginia Union game to determine who wins the North if Elizabeth City were to win in Bowie. And so that game in itself becomes really important as well now. So if Virginia State were to win and Elizabeth City were to win, then Virginia State would take the championship because they beat Elizabeth City earlier this year. And if Virginia Union were to win and Elizabeth City were to win, then Elizabeth City would win, which would be, you know, very few people would have realized and thought that Elizabeth City would have won the championship after winning, I think, 2 or 3 games last year. But
right.
They certainly can win it if Virginia Union can knock off Virginia State and Elizabeth City can beat Bowie. So if you're looking at the Virginia State-Virginia Union game, it's a very interesting game, too. Virginia State only has 2 losses on the season.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting with them is that, you know, they have a very strong run game.
Mm-hmm.
Trenton Cannon has been just running out of his mind.
Mm-hmm.
He's had the games where he's rushed well over 100 yards. And what's interesting with him is you have to look at total offense with him. Mm-hmm. Because he can catch the ball as well as run the ball. He's had these 200-yard total offense games lately. And then they have Kayvon Bellamy. He used to be the starter. But so they're a great 1-2 punch in the backfield. If you're looking at Virginia Union, you're looking at William Stanback, who used to be at UCF. He, you know, to me, he or Amir Hall at Bowie State have to be your leaders for Conference Player of the Year on the offensive side. So really, I mean, these 2 teams can score a lot of points. Mm-hmm. The bigger issue is, you know, are they going to be so tense that it turns into a low-scoring, grinding affair? Mm-hmm. You know, really, Virginia Union has a better pass game, mm-hmm. but sometimes you just don't see it.
Right.
And I don't know, it just seems to disappear from time to time, and they try to be as balanced as possible. Mm-hmm. But it just seems to disappear, and I don't. It's hard to say why, but I thought Virginia Union was going to be that team that emerged from the North after last year's performance, and they've kind of stumbled mm-hmm. Down. So I think Virginia State would have the edge in that game.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly have something to play for, but it's a big rivalry game, and you never know what may happen.
Right. Right. So either way, it looks like that. It looks like we know Winston-Salem State, and we know they'll be playing against someone that they've played against in the last 3 championship games. Ironically, they played against Elizabeth City State back in 2012, and 2014 they played against Virginia State, and then 2015 they played against Bowie State. So as we wind up here, give us your prediction for the CIAA championship game.
Well, I think that in the end, I think Bowie's going to take care of business. And I think that they're just going to have enough offense to get it going.
Right.
So I think that you'll see Bowie State back in the championship game again.
So we got a rematch, right?
It'll be a rematch of last year in which Bowie will come back and hopefully try to knock off Winston-Salem State this time. What's really interesting is if Elizabeth City enters into this championship game, because it'll be the exact opposite for Winston in terms of how the championship was played last year when Winston was a 5-5 team. That's exactly what Elizabeth City would be, a 5-5 team going into the championship game. So I think it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really compelling storylines, but I think Bowie's just going to have enough offense to get it going. And I think you find a kind of an offense versus defensive matchup with Bowie State and Winston-Salem State in the championship game the following week.
Right. Okay. Good. Well, look, Kris, I appreciate you coming on, and definitely after this next week is up, maybe we can get together and talk again and see what your thoughts are on the championship games there. But again, I want to thank our guest, Kris Ferguson, who blogs at d2.com. Very knowledgeable, always knows the ins and outs. One of the guys that I look to help keep me up on the D2 as we straddle that line between D2 and FCS here at HBCU Game Day. So, again, Kris, I thank you for coming on, and we'll have to have you back on again.
Hey, thank you anytime, and I'll be available anytime.
All right, appreciate it, guys. Thanks a lot. And, again, you are listening to the HBCU Game Day podcast.